English translation, 280th contact, Friday, 3rd March 2000, 07:04 hours.
Greetings, my friend. Sorry for my early appearance, but this early hour is the best time for me today. I am aware that you are still not fully rested, since you did not crawl into your bed until 3:40 HRs, as I noticed, but I have to choose this early time, because I was very busy elsewhere.
Debarasi, language unknown. It is all right. I am glad that you could at least come here, because I have some things to discuss with you that seem important to me. By the way, good day, Ptaah. Besides being happy that you were able to come here, I am also happy, of course.
Which I can also say for my part.
Can I start with my request right away?
I ask for it.
We still have one question open concerning the election of the board members. What about it if there is an equality of votes in a ballot, or in the election of a board member, etc.? Did you ask Quetzal what to do? We have not received any guidelines from him in this regard.
If there should be a tie, then the drawing of lots, has to decide. This is because the electorate does not have to vote a second time on the same facts and thus necessarily change their basic opinion.
That is clear. Then I come to my main concern. Since I asked Florina to ask you to come here, it has come about that I will receive a visit on the 14th of March from Katharina Belvedere, a daughter of Pastor Zimmerman who is still alive. As Hans Georg explained to me, he has already given her a part of his work concerning her father to read, which is why she now has a whole series of questions for me. And it was precisely in this regard that Hans Georg asked me whether you might know something about your father, about Svath, in relation to what form of contact he, Zimmerman, had with Svath, and how often that was. For Hans Georg's work I already wrote him a few lines on 6/1/2000, which contains some facts of what I still remember of Father Zimmerman's explanations. You can read what I wrote in a moment, here. But first a question. Do you know from Svath how Father Zimmerman coped with the contact?
Yes, my father gave me various information and explanations. The contacts between him and Pastor Zimmerman were exclusively telepathic in nature, the number of which amounted to 5. The first contact was made on Thursday, the 2nd of May, 1929, the last on Monday, the 3rd of December, 1934. With the fact of the contacts and that extraterrestrial human life exists, he found no problems with this, because he was always open in his consciousness and clear about the fact that in the whole universe not only the Earth alone could have been inseminated with life, and that there must be still many other planets in space. He got to grips with the creational teaching remarkably quickly and well, and had no problems with it, and especially because he incorporated the creation teaching, which my father passed on to him, into his Christian faith and identified God with creation. He identified the spiritual energy with the Holy Spirit and Emmanuel, that is to say Jesus Christ, as the fulfilling creational laws and recommendations, as well as the child, that is to say son of the creation, which he called God, as I already explained. So for him, God, Son, and Holy Spirit were the decisive values, which is why he always held his sermons, abdications, baptisms, explanations, and marriage words, etc., with these words and concepts. With this he connected, and he was a knowledgeable one, it must be said, his Christian faith with the teaching of the creation and the teaching of the Spirit, aka creation energy teaching. But unfortunately it was not granted him to let the knowledge received from Svath to flow openly into his work, because this would have caused a lot of incomprehension among many of his churchgoers, would have created mistrust and possibly even caused disaster, because the churchgoers and other people in Bulek at that time were a special people, as you yourself know.
Only enough, yes. Faith in devils and demons as well as the anchoring of the Christian religion were quite deep.
Right. This was also one of the reasons why Pastor Zimmerman was considered a mystic and eccentric in certain circles, but this was not openly stated. As has been the case since time immemorial, such statements were made only behind his and his family's backs, for they were afraid that such things would become callable. One could have been called to account, and that was not the intention of those who talked about him secretly. He was called a mystic and an oddball by certain people because he also had acquaintances with persons who were involved in esoteric and parapsychological matters. Pastor Zimmerman was particularly interested in telepathy and hypnosis, which is why he often met people in Bulak and Zurich, etc., who were also interested in hypnosis.
I know. There was Hans Schad, for example. And as Hans-Georg said and found out, there were several others.
That corresponds to correctness.
Once again you speak like Ketzel. He always said, that is of correctness.
The word also belongs to my linguistic usage.
It is okay. Hans-Georg tries very hard to collect all kinds of information about Pastor Zimmerman, as you know, and it is almost unbelievable what he collects. In the end, his work becomes a real book.
I know. He is very committed and diligent.
You could say that. But do you have anything else concerning Father Zimmerman that would be important to tell?
The most important thing should have been said.
But I still have one question. How did it happen that Father Zimmerman's wife and his sons and daughters did not notice anything he really knew about?
He had the valuable principle of never making statements about things that he had to consider professional secrets, or that he himself classified as such. And such a professional secret for him was also the fact of the contact with my father Svath and the task related to your person.
And he did not talk about it with his wife?
No, never. My father clearly explained that to me. Pastor Zimmerman was an extraordinarily correct, honest, and conscientious man to whom it would never have even occurred that he might make the slightest remark regarding something that was a professional secret.
Pastor Rudolf Zimmerman.
His reverence for his office and his vow was deeply rooted in him, so much so that he would never have broken them, even through coercion.
He was really a wonderful person. A fact that I already noticed during my boyhood. And this was and is a value that has survived to this day. Look at this picture. That was Father Zimmerman.
Ah, I did not know what he looked like. A remarkable man, indeed.
I agree. But now, dear friend, you should read my lines.
Of course.
Inspired by Pastor Rudolf Zimmerman, according to his explanations at that time.
Actually, as he explained, he wanted to become a pastor by tradition, but at an early age, he was probably 12 or 13 years old, he had an inspiration that he should not take up the profession of a pastor by tradition, but by fulfilling his duties in order to bring joy, peace, harmony, and help to people. As he explained to me then, this inspiration is said to have come from an external source, namely Svath, who in 1929 telepathically contacted him and knowingly prepared him for the coming events after Pastor Zimmerman had declared himself ready for the task. It was not from tradition, but from inspiration that he learned the profession of a pastor, who, always according to his words at the time, very quickly became his conviction. Inspiration seemed to him to be a vocation which, in a certain sense, also corresponded to the circumstances. As Father Zimmerman explained to me, the concept of the creation was of decisive importance for him, although he equated this concept with the word God. For his parish or churchgoers, etc., however, he was not allowed to use the term creation according to his sense of understanding, which is why he always spoke only of God during all his time, although for him God meant creation, because he had the right understanding of it. So he did not equate God with an old man with a long white beard, but as the primordial force of life, the creation of all things. He also called this primordial power Father or Godfather, and Emmanuel, alias Jesus Christ, as a child or son of this primordial power, he equated creation or Godfather with it, in the sense that all human beings are children of the creation or children of God or Godfather. This may seem a bit strange for a priest, but one has to consider that he lived with his understanding for creation, that is to say, for God in a direction of thought, which was Christian and which he also represented, only that he did not reveal his understanding of creation and God to the outside world. However, this did not disparage him as a pastor, nor did it disparage his convictions or his joy in his profession. He also cultivated an unusually high-quality fulfillment of responsibility as a man and priest in his actions and advice. Pastor Rudolf Zimmermann was considered a mystic in certain circles, but this in no wise detracted from his humanity and his priesthood. On the contrary, he was therefore only more respected, even if he was regarded with a certain respectful shyness by some people. But this must also have been connected with the fact that he was the priest, and the humans have always shown a certain shy reverence to a priest. 2250 hours, Billy.
What I have written corresponds largely to what I have already explained.
But now I have another question. You once told me that Father Zimmerman was called to a contact. Consequently, I thought that at least one contact was personal and physical.
No, to my knowledge, this was not the case, but all contacts were purely telepathic in nature. Apparently, you misunderstood being called and concluded that a personal contact had taken place. Being called to a contact simply means being called to a telepathic contact.
Then it is like a radio call, etc. You are called, that would be the right version.
You can also define it so, yes.
Your definition unfortunately caused a misunderstanding. But that is not bad. I got you the books of Jan Holy, alias Jan van Helsing. The question now about whether you have studied them and what you think about them, and have you dealt more closely with a clarification concerning this man. He wrote to me once, when he was about 24 years old, claiming megalomaniacally that he had already learned several academic professions, and also had contact with extraterrestrials. In Switzerland as well as in Germany, several of his books are banned, which in my opinion are extremely neo-Nazi and anti-Semitic, and whose contents are clearly mumbled together from similar writings and books. He has recently brought another book onto the market in which he now denies these facts and presents everything differently than it really is. At least that is how I see things.
With which you see them in the right light. Our clarifications have confirmed your statements and assumptions. His alleged research is based on assumptions, suspicions, and false written works and books, as well as on a rather neo-Nazi anti-Semitic attitude. He has a rather reprehensible attitude in this regard.
These are clear words. Well, I, for my part, have not been contacted by him since I had replied that I do not want anything to do with him. Not least because he hides behind the false name Jan van Helsing and cannot stand by his slanderous works and assertions with his real name. In addition to him, There are many other neo-Nazi anti-Semitic ones, some of whom find it necessary to spread idiotic anti-Semitic Nazi machinations on the internet, and also bombard me with them. For this reason, I asked Christian Freener to draft a correction regarding the fact that the Figu and I want to distance ourselves from all this circulating neo-Nazi anti-Semitic nonsense, and have nothing to do with it. In particular, the neo-Nazists and anti-Semites function around with the idiocy known as Protocols of the Sages of Zion, about which I wrote something for Figu Bulletin number 28, which is then also fed into the internet, as well as Christian's correction entitled Racism, Neo-Nazism, Extremism, Anti-Semitism. Here are these 2 pages if you want to read them.
Gladly.
The Protocols of the Wise Men of Zion.
Since 1903, anti-Semitic neo-Nazi groups, organizations, individual fanatics, and other anti-Jewish circles have officially been working around with the so-called Protocols of the Wise Men of Zion, which are ascribed to Jewish Zionist circles or wise men. Since then, they have given and continue to give rise to persecution and hatred of the Jews. But what really corresponds to the truth with regard to these protocols? In a few words, as the Pleiadier explain, it is a tremendous work of lies, an incredibly bad forgery or plagiarism which originated from earlier novels which were written after the middle of the 19th century. According to the Pleiadischen data, the highest boss of the Russian Secret Service in Paris, Pyotr Rachkovsky, created from it in the years 1897-98 the final version of the slanderous work, which was published then for the first time in the year 1903 in Russia in the magazine Znamia the Banner, with the lying claim that the protocol is genuine. The actual dissemination of the protocol, however, did not take place until 1919, quite explosively as the work of Russian opponents of the 1917 revolution. The intention was undoubtedly to turn anti-Semitism into a weapon against Bolshevism by publishing the alleged protocols. In NSDAP Germany, the protocols were then adopted, brought here and introduced by a Ukrainian officer and fighter against the Russian Revolution, named Fyodor Wienberg, living in exile in Germany. The slanderous work is still in circulation today and continues to cause racist damage, claiming that the Jews created a secret world government and hoarded all the gold. The wise men of Zion and the Jewish people are to blame for wars and political and economic crises, etc. Such slanderous allegations exist in many variations of protocols, which of course is a ready-made meal for anti-Semitic Nazi and other right-wing extremist racist circles. As an example, the following 2 versions of nonsensical claims of the alleged protocols may serve as examples. Quote, the function of war. In order to induce power-hungry people to abuse power, we will bring all forces into opposition to one another. Throughout Europe, and through Europe's relations in other parts of the world, we must create fermentations, disputes, and enmities. We must be able to counter any resistance through wars with our neighboring country. But if these neighbors dare to stand together against us, we must offer them resistance through a world war or, quote, death. Death is the inevitable end of all, so it is better to bring those closer to that end who stand in the way of our goals. Today, the anti-Semitic neo-Nazi and other racist and right-wing extremist circles are using all governments and high-ranking government figures as well as all banks and their bosses, first and foremost the Rothschilds and the business magnates, etc., in the slanderous machinations of the protocols in order to stir up hatred especially against the Jewish world and its alleged world government. During the Nazi era, the anti-Semitic, inflammatory writing Protokolle der Weisen von Zion, Protocols of the Wise Men of Zion, was spread by the Nazis with proclamations and cheers, not only in Germany, but also wherever Nazis were active in other countries. In Switzerland, these were the Frontler who circulated the lie protocols when Adolf Hitler finally seized power in Germany in the spring of 1933. This led the Jewish organizations in Switzerland to take legal action against the defamatory protocols at the Bern District Court. The trial attracted worldwide attention, and it was made clear that the alleged protocols were a forgery or a work of lies. Unfortunately, a few years later, the verdict was trivialized and, so to speak, overturned again by the Supreme Court, which meant that the lies and slander against the Jews gained the upper hand again. The protocols of the Wise Men of Zion are nothing other than lies, deception, and fraud in truly international criminal form. They are a tremendously slanderous work of irresponsible, criminal anti-Semites, an evil work of genocide and insult to the people, with which Adolf Hitler and his henchmen also functioned, and which contributed immensely to the fact that in Hitler's Nazi empire, millions of innocent Jews and also of people of other races and of other faiths, men, women, and children, were tortured, tormented, and delivered to terrible deaths. For those interested, the following book is worth reading: Die Protokolle der Weisen von Zion by Jeffrey L. Sammons, Wallstein Verlag, ISBN 3-2-891244.191x. Billy.
Racism, neo-Nazism, extremism, antisemitism.
Again and again it happens that the FIGU, and especially Billy, Edward Albert Meyer, are asked for their opinion concerning organizations like the so-called Illuminati, the Bilderberg and the Freemasons, as well as people like the Rockefeller and Rothschild families, etc. In most cases, the questioners send us pamphlets and unveiling pamphlets, the extreme, even slanderous content of which led us to explain our position publicly. The FIGU and Billy Edward Albert Meyer clearly dissociate themselves from all the many abstruse conspiracy theories which are spread worldwide in book form and over the Internet. Books like those by Jan van Helsing, alias Jan Holy, and especially writings like the so-called Protocols of the Wise Men of Zion, are the worst slanderous works of art. The latter in particular is an invented work of madness for the purpose of slandering and annihilating the people of the Jewish faith. Practically all writings of this kind testify to a confused Nazi and religious fanaticism of degenerated form. Furthermore, we distance ourselves from all those who claim that the so-called Holocaust, the mass extermination of a huge number of people of various faiths and schools of thought by the German Nazi regime, did not take place at all and is a pure propaganda lie. Furthermore, we condemn all forms of racism and xenophobia because they are inhumane and degrading. We are convinced that the free expression of opinion finds its limits where people are denigrated, threatened, and even killed because of a different faith, race, etc. We are convinced that the freedom of expression is not only a matter of the freedom of religion, but also of the freedom of expression. This includes those humans and organizations who, under the pretext of combating anti-Semitism and racism, etc., exclude other groups of humans and thereby try to prevent measures that serve the long-term welfare of humankind, such as effective measures against overpopulation as propagated by the FIGU. To take the wind out of some people's sails right now, if in talks between Billy and the extraterrestrial visitors, for example, the Americans, USA, or the Israelis were and are strongly criticized, then naturally only those members and elements of those countries are meant by it, which bring Earth and humankind to the edge of the abyss through their egoism and striving for power, as well as their religious confusion, maliciousness, and in their arrogance. All those humans in the countries concerned who have become decent citizens and have not become degenerate do not, of course, have to feel affected, and will probably not do so, because they themselves suffer from the self-important actions of their degenerate compatriots. If someone condemns his fellow human being to be inferior because of his or her skin color, faith, nationality or gender, etc., then this clearly testifies to his or her own inferior state of consciousness and his or her reprehensible attitude. The degenerated thinking and behavior of such convicted offenders should also be criticized harshly and openly, and, if necessary, effective measures must be taken against it. It is the duty of every single human being, and thus of every government and every country, to finally recognize that in every fellow human being there is a spiritual part of the creation, and that through this, every human being is connected with all other human beings as humanity. Figu fights for the fact that this knowledge increasingly penetrates into the consciousness of human beings. Christian Freiner.
The written corresponds to what must be said.
Then everything is acceptable.
Certainly.
Then something else. Can you tell me when the first oxygen developed on Earth, or how the first oxygen atmosphere developed? You know your way around the history of Earth.
That is no secret. According to our knowledge, the first atmospheric oxygen developed 3.9,390,000 years ago.
Then the first low life forms might have developed in about the same period? Our scientists have set periods of time for this, which are set with lower numbers or years.
51, I'm aware of that. With regard to your assumption regarding the first low life forms, it must be said that these appeared about 3.8 billion, 3,800,000 years ago in the water and soil areas. This is, in fact, only related to the water and earth, because truthfully there was low life much earlier, billions of years before, when the earth had no water and no real soil. This earliest low life was settled in the glowing masses of the early soils, where it developed or where it also settled from out of space. This low life consisted of thermobacteria, a type of thermobacteria that had and still has its habitat in the glowing or magma masses. But this is not the only thermobacterial life that exists in the universe, because besides this there are other things that exist in even higher temperatures than in magma and lava. So there is also thermobacterial life in every sun, formed according to the type of sun.
As far as I know, sulfur bacteria are also a form of thermobacteria. And just as there are probably also bacterial life forms in other substances and elements. That is how I can imagine it.
This is indeed the case. In the course of time, earthly scientists will also bring this into knowledge and experience through their research.
As you say, so it will be. Anyway, thank you very much for your explanations. This would mean that, from my point of view, everything official would be asked and said once again. So we can turn to our private things.
For my part, I still have a request that should be addressed in such a form that the group members also become aware of it.
Whatever you say. So let us hear what you have to say. Hopefully, it is something to be happy about.
No, unfortunately, that is not the case. In short, it is the behavior of the group members during the night watch duty at the center. For years now, we have noticed that the patrols and duties are not carried out in a dutiful manner. This is also true with regard to the default approach to the passkey boxes. This startup is often neglected, so the time recorder is not operated with the key, which of course is visible on the control strip. Such action, it must be said, and it is Ketzel's opinion, is extremely undutiful, negligent, and irresponsible, especially in that such neglect results in a lack of security. As we noted, various group members still consider the night security watch to be an annoying duty and therefore do not exercise it correctly. They do not consider that safety is really a priority and the duty of the guard must be handled correctly. Since, however, this correctness is not given in some cases, it is necessary that measures are taken to counteract the inaccuracies. In this form, Quetzal and I wish that from now on the same measures be applied as were introduced and handled at the time. When various group members behaved in such a manner that they constantly interrupted others and did not let them speak.
Well, we have already talked about that, just 2 days ago. That is, we were just a few members who thought about it, and also found that a measure like the one you just mentioned could perhaps have an effect and correct the evil of incorrectness. I find it quite interesting that you and Quetzal also came up with the same idea. I think, however, that we should discuss these issues in private afterwards.
As you like. But I still have something to say about it. As we have had to find out from the records of the control device for quite some time now, at the monthly general meeting, the non-operation of the passkey box is not taken very seriously, and it is thought that it is a trifle. At least this is our impression of how the group president Andreas handles the matter with regard to the misbehavior of the night watch persons, and in particular with regard to the non-piercing of the control clock. His behavior in this respect, that he tackles the inaccuracies in a fun way, somehow exposes everything to ridicule, whereby no purposeful efforts are made in the mistakes. Rather, this results in indifference and an even more serious irresponsibility. As president, Andreas should demand more respect for correctness and apply a straight and firm line that is directional, correct, and relevant. In other things, 2. He should be more group-minded and realize that he is the direct representative of the community to the outside world, which is why he cannot simply hide behind his own behavior, feelings, and views. He has accepted his predetermined office as president of the community, so he must also handle it within the framework of the group rules and group matters. I must also speak another time about what I have said before, in the sense that Andreas, as president of the community, must learn to be brief and not lengthy in his speeches and utterances. His lengthy speeches and statements should urgently be summarized in short forms, because the whole thing has an aggressive, tedious, and very tiring effect on the various members of the group. He should bear this in mind and make an urgent effort to remedy this evil in himself. And for your part, I must recommend another time to you to interrupt him in his long-winded rush of words. If he himself does not realize that he is unnecessarily talking too excessively and that he thereby impairs the attention of the most diverse group members and drives them to tiredness and aggression.
Well, you are probably right.
What is said is of correctness. There is no doubt about it. That is what I had to say.
Not very pleasing. Can we now turn to the private matters?
I ask for it.